got to hospital and I found I'd fully fractured my humerus. I had literally snapped it in half, clean in half. It was actually broken in two halves. Because of where the fracture was, they couldn't put a cast on it. They just put me in a sling, which was trying to force the two halves together. The fracture started to improve. It got about 10% joined, but then it stopped healing and they couldn't work out why. And then at this point, they decided that I was going to have surgery. There was no way of avoiding it. The first one, they took a bone graft from the top of my pelvis to actually fill in the gap between the two bones. And the second surgery was a big metal plate and some screw. There were 5 huge screws that actually joined the whole thing together, which forced the 2 bits of bone together. Along with that, they'd had to unattach the muscle and put them back. I could feel it at the time. I had like the little raw plugs you put in a wall to put a picture frame up with. I had those 3 of those screwed into the bone that had a little loop on. And it was from those that they actually then sewed the muscles back to the humerus. So I was in a sling like this. I wasn't allowed to move outwards because I would have snapped the work they'd done. Wasn't allowed to move. I was having weekly physiotherapy. And it was keeping in touch with the community as much as anything. That was the encouragement to actually believe that yoga or my practice would at some point come back. But Louise Newton at AYL was absolutely brilliant. She let me come to the Shala. She just said, do what you can. I'll help you with what you can. But I think with Louise's help, I got back most of primary series. But I still lacked strength. And the main thing I really lacked, was range of motion. So at this point, I went back to the surgeon and he said, well, the option really is to take the metal work out. And I went back to the Shala, and the first time I went back, I got some plaster. I actually just put a cover on it, just a big long plaster to keep it covered up. Urdhva Dhanurasana was a bit of a problem. I'd completely lost the strength in my arm. The other thing I didn't appreciate how much I'd lost was the stamina. And I had to learn to actually use my energy more wisely, relearn almost every posture. I had to think about every posture before I did it. So gradually I put the practice back together, and Louise would help me with the postures I couldn't do. But it was the stamina. Louise got my postures back, but my body took months and months really to get that level of stamina back. And on those days when I thought I'd never get my practice back or I'd never be able to move my arm, it was the motivation of the practice that kept me going. So here we are, it's February 2015. I'm back in Mysore. I'm practicing with Saraswati this time, which has been absolutely fantastic. She's 74 years old, but she's got this amazing energy of how she gets around the Shala and adjusts people and helps people. And after all that's gone before, it's fantastic to be here. I never thought I'd come back. There is such a thing as Mysore magic. People talk about that, but I think it exists. When I first came out of hospital, I couldn't even lift my little mug of tea off the ground. So I think it's patience, perseverance. You also have to have, I suppose, a little bit of a belief that you will get it back. You have to have the motivation to get back on your mat. You just need to do a little bit every day. And it's amazing how much of a mental lift as well it is, as well as being physically helpful for your rehabilitation. I'm 50. It's not like I'm young and came to the practice in my 20s. I've worked for everything I've done with this practice. I've worked damn hard to learn to do back bends. Back bends were my nemesis. But now, even with a dodgy shoulder, I can do Urdhva Dhanurasana. I can walk my hands in. I can just about stand up again, even if I do look like a giraffe sometimes when my legs go all over the place when I come up. Keep trying, try every day. You'd be amazed how much one day improves, the next day improves, and suddenly you can do something that seemed miles away, and suddenly it will do that and you can do it. Just have the belief that you'll get back to where you were.